to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley, and this is the Business Blueprint. What we're going to talk about this week is value-based leadership. So last week we talked about values. We started talking about how to identify your values and why an organization may have certain values. This week we want to talk about putting leadership into action and making sure that your leadership follows the company values and your personal values. Because hopefully at this point in time, if you're a leader within an organization, you've looked at the organization's values, they align with your values, and now you can move forward. So Dan, my first question is a really easy one. What is leadership?
You said it was easy. Yeah. As you asked that question, I was thinking back on our prior episode and a comment that you made. And the example that you gave was something so simple as emptying the coffee maker, making sure the lights are turned on, taking out the trash, right? Something so easy, but that others are like, I'm not going to do that. That's so-and-so's job, or that's beneath me. And as you were giving that example, all I could think of was servant leadership. And being a true leader is you're serving the team members that you work with or your colleagues. Leadership really is just all about what can I do to make others better? How can I help them along their career growth? What can I do that would not only make them better as leaders, but even people, but also how does that translate over onto the company side? What is it that I can do to move both forward in a positive fashion? And it's hard. You may promote someone that meets all the criteria on paper, but as they become a leader and you're working with them, then you're realizing, oh, well, maybe this person isn't the right fit for this. And then you have tough decisions to make. And one of the things that I've learned is data is wonderful, right? I don't want to make any decision without data, but that's just one piece of it. And when I still to this day need to do better on is when I'm thinking on promoting someone or helping someone out, whatever the case may be, talk to others to get an idea of what that project is. Is it something that I can add value to? Or if I want to promote someone, talk to others that maybe they manage. And I'm a big fan of skip meetings, meaning that the person that reports to me, I'll go and just talk to the others that report to that person, and not in a way of fishing to get them in trouble, but ways to help them improve. And I just remember back in my early days of managing, I didn't have that. It was, you're now a manager, you're now a partner, you're now a CEO, you're now this. And it's like, great, the title's wonderful, but what does that mean? Give me some training. And I, just unfortunately made a lot of mistakes, but learned from them. And that's what's most important too. And that also goes back to when you're helping someone, I always advise the colleagues that work with me that are part of my team. And it sounds so silly, but I always start off saying, I want you to fail. That's because you're going to learn and we're going to work through this. Because if you're successful 100% of the time, something's wrong. Either it's not the right fit, or maybe we didn't need you in this role, or there's so many different reasons why. But as long as we can turn failure into a positive, it's not a consistent failure, we're all going to learn, and we're all human. And that's, for me, it's been, fortunately or unfortunately, the best way of learning. But it teaches us, okay, what went wrong and what can we do to not only do better, but make sure that it doesn't happen again. And what are we learning from it? Because there's so many different things that we can learn from one mistake, whether it's a mistake that costs some revenue, or maybe it's just a small mistake, but there's always something that we can learn. And I always use that and apply it when I talk to somebody. I always want to just learn one thing. And it's not just that I'm asking, what's your name? I want to just learn something about you, or learn something for the day, because you want to be engaging. But to go back to the leadership, I always look at it as servant leadership. What can I do to serve the others who work with me?
Kind of agree with the servant-based leadership. I liked your example of the failure. I was doing our mentorship thing this morning, and I was trying to make a point. So I told him about a time that I failed, because if one of our values is to allow people to fail and allow people to learn, then we need to somehow let people know that we have that value, that we hold that close to us. And so that's how I do it. Is I say, hey, here's an example of me trying to help you, but this is an example when I failed. And I promise you, I never forgot the lesson that I learned that day that I failed. And I was standing there in front of my customer, and I was like, man, This is not good. So, Rebecca, when taking leader, how do you ensure that in every decision that you make as a leader, your values are intertwined in those decisions? And another really easy question, that the people that you're leading understand that the values are intertwined in your decision making process.
Sure. So reinforcing constantly what they are and why what we're doing, fits in with the values.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, every month, when we have our monthly all team meeting, we do a little bit of a reinforcement. By the way, these are our values, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one in particular and how maybe it came up over the past month, or how I saw someone in our team be really exemplary at demonstrating this particular value, something along those lines. And so that's one way to just sort of reinforce it, hopefully keep it top of mind, because it's one thing to have them printed out and like on the kitchen wall, but it's another thing to actually talk about, well, this is how it translated for us. And so, here's what the value is. And I want to touch on it because so-and-so really demonstrated that, over the past month in this particular project. And we want to, give them a little shout out or extra credit or whatever it might be, right? Just for living those values and demonstrating them. So that's really number one, is just communicating what they are. And then as you're looking to develop other leaders within the organization, asking them, well, what do you think we should do? And does it align with what our values are? And let them come up with the solution, let them present their case, and you may or may not agree with the final decision, but you're giving them the opportunity to go through the decision-making process and see, okay, does it align with our values, or is this just some sort of gut reaction, right? How do we get to the root of analyzing what the problem is and how we get to the next step? So much of it for me really comes down to someone who wants to take ownership and they want to take accountability. And so they don't mind, like you said, digging in and something that maybe isn't in their job description, but they're willing to sort of take on that ownership of whatever the need is and then develop, whoever is coming in underneath them or whoever they might need to train or help somebody else along the way.
Mm-hmm. And you said a word that we haven't said yet, and that's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are trying to ensure that every decision is aligning to your values, you can't be reactive, right? You have to actually step up and say, okay, let's just throw a hypothesis out there. Somebody said something bad about you. They're like, man, I don't like your blonde hair.
Mm-hmm.
And you get very reactive. You're like, well, wait, hold on. Does this line up with my values? Is my response going to line up with my values? And instead of getting, and I know this is a silly example, but instead of getting angry about somebody that says that, say, look, you know what our company values are. How is that feedback aligned with our values? What am I supposed to do with that? And push it back on the person that you want to react to now to say, hey, how does this align with our values? And one of our values is to, professionalism. It's to help people move forward. It's to speak to people respectfully. What are you trying to get me to do about my hair? Or even worse is you'll get an email from somebody. And I think this is one of my pet peeves. We all send emails too quickly. And we send emails with errors in them. We send emails with punctuation errors in them. I don't care if you send me an email with a punctuation error. But I have gotten emails back from people that are like, oh, well, so-and-so, like I've seen emails like, oh, well, so-and-so forgot a period. So what? You understood the message. Is telling them they forgot a period moving this conversation forward in any value-based way. So Dan, when you think about the John Maxwell maxim of training your bench, right? Getting your leaders trained under you, right? That's the most important thing that all leaders should be looking at. How do I train the next generation of leaders? How do you ensure to instill the values in the next line of people?
The one word that comes to my mind as you ask that question is accountability. Mm-hmm. And I say that because as we're talking, I'm thinking, another word that we haven't really talked about is accountability. And it's a scary word because in my experience, myself included in my prior days, I was scared to death to do anything because I was like, oh man, I'll be held accountable. I could be fired. I could be publicly shamed,
Mm-hmm.
And so it really just didn't make me think proactively, which is never a good thing for an employee. But also it's How I try to do it now is, yes, I want you to take a risk. Yes, I mentioned I want you to fail, but that's owning it, taking the accountability, and what can we learn? But I also explain this allows you to be creative, and that's part of your growth. If I
Mhm.
tell you you can't fail, or you're going to take accountability, and I'm just going to really stick it to you, well, that's going to stifle growth, and that's just going to be a recipe for disaster, not just for that person, but for my team and for the company. And so, allowing others to see other team members take a leap of faith and do something that's outside the box or take a risk on something. I think that's wonderful. And I always point that out, whether or not it's a decision that we agree with and we move forward. I always want to compliment in a way that I really like the way that you're thinking. That's a great thought. Maybe we can parking lot that and come back to it, or that's something that we can consider next quarter. But it allows others to see, okay, yeah, so I can think outside the box. And that's what I want. And I also want others to challenge me in the sense of, did you think about this? Or, well, what if we did it this way? Because then it just is for me as a leader, when I see others start to do that, of course, challenge in a professional way, not in a you're wrong and I'm going to show that my boss is wrong or my superior is wrong. It's we all are on the same team, and that team is, what can we do to not only grow the business but serve the clients, and they do run parallel. And it's just exciting to see that kind of like light go off, and when they had not one idea but two ideas. And I just had this happen earlier this week. I was having a tough conversation with one of my colleagues who works with me, and we had a topic of conversation that was sensitive. And I asked this person to weigh in because I wanted their thoughts. And at the end of the day, I kind of tied it back to our values. And I said, okay, I hear what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense, but show me where on the values that this type of behavior aligns with that. And then just to see, because we were on teams, that face go, oh, okay, I get it, right? And yes, this is a tough decision, and this is what managers do. We have to make tough decisions. And so, there's many examples. That's just the most recent one. But then when you have team meetings, always ask for others' opinions. I remember when I was first being a leader, sometimes it's intimidating, right? If you're in there with a CEO or an owner, you're kind of, at least I was a little timid because I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to get publicly ashamed here. I definitely don't want to make the owner or the CEO look like they don't know what they're doing. But I just remember someone calling on me and asking for my opinion. And it just resonated with me at that time. It was the owner. And he was like, Dan, what do you think?
Mhm.
And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Ever since then, it has made me feel valued. And I remember that. And that's how I want others on my teams. I'm always asking for opinions. And I always say,
Mhm.
okay, if it's crickets, I'm like, now tell me what's wrong. Give me the other side to this. Always come to me with three solutions and a recommendation. But I also want to know, argue me essentially the other side to this. And I remember at a prior job that the CIO and a couple other C-level people would come in like, okay, Dan, here's this side and here's the other side and here's what I recommend. And it was just a turning point because they were thinking, yes, all right, what can we do to move this company forward?
Mhm. Yeah,
Long.
yeah. You know, there is nobody who doesn't have a great idea, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what position you are within the organization. Every single person should be considered to be a leader, at least in their sphere of influence, right? So, we all have organizations where technically there may be a low person in the organization, but even that person's a leadership within their sphere of influence. And if they hold your values dear and they live your values, then they're helping lead up. And that's one of my favorite ideas is managing up. I think it's something Jocko Willink said in one of his books, Managing Up. And that's the idea that, like you said, Dan, is you can call on somebody and say, hey, can you just explain to me how this relates back to our values? Respectfully, of course. Or like, hey, can I pull you aside privately outside of this meeting, and can I just have a better understanding of what you're asking me to do, and things like that. One of you talked about accountability. It's one of my values, my personal values, is being accountable, but there is a fault point to that. And I think both of you will shake your head yes, that I tend to take accountability for things that maybe we need to move on from. And I say, well, no, maybe I can fix this. No, maybe I can fix this. So, Rebecca, how do you work with somebody who bastardizes a value in that way? And I say it in such a way like I don't think I always do a good job holding that value to where it should be, because sometimes I take it so far that it is now into an illogical stance in leadership, especially.
That's you're bringing up somebody else on our team who very takes things very hard, right? Every time there's a slight disappointment, every time there's, some underperformance or something like that, they just, and it's just painful. And you want them to swing in the other direction a little bit. And so while it's important to be accountable, take ownership, take responsibility, you can't be so hard on yourself that you just like crawl under your desk and stop functioning. So there's a happy medium for everything. You can't put everything on your shoulders. You can't take on all of the problems of your organization. You can take on your part and you can figure out what the steps are forward, right? There has to be and here's what we do about it. It can't just be, and now I'm just going to, shrivel up and I can't even perform my job anymore. So there's a point in every value where it just gets to be ridiculous. And so coaching that back to being productive. Okay, you already have this, you're feeling this way, great. Now let's use it, right? How do we turn this into something that can be better for next time? What were the lessons that we learned? How can we, make the next project more successful, whatever it is? But you have to kind of almost coach them to the other side of it, which seems a little bit ridiculous, but that's how everybody is. Everybody's going to have the things that they're really, really strong with and the things they're weaker on. And so for some elements, you're going to be coaching them towards the value. And in others, you're going to have to coach them kind of down off the ledge a little bit.
And, fortunately for me, I have two people that will help me sometimes open my eyes to things that I'm doing, which are a little bit obscure. So I'll open this question up to either one of you that want to answer this one. What do you do when your values call on you to part ways with an employee? How do you handle that?
It's hard, but it's necessary. And the best way to deal with it is right away. So once you have the realization, and it's just the flip side of what Dan was talking about earlier with, if you're working somewhere and you realize that your values don't align with your organization, at some point you have to exit from that organization. And so it works the other way too. If we have a realization that one of our employees just does not align, and in more ways than one, and in something that they're not responding to coaching on, and we've tried to take the effort to train them and bring them around and teach them what the values are and how to live up to them, how to succeed in our organization. At a certain point, you just say it's not working. And, it's almost that breakup conversation. It's not you, it's us. We can't, it just doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't fit. And so you try to make that exit as smooth as you possibly can, just like every other situation that we've talked about, taking a really even tone, trying to keep everybody level headed. This really isn't working. We do want the best for you. We want to part on good terms. Everything, let's just move on. It's not working anymore.
And so, Dan, I'll give you the easier part of this question. I can't give you the easy ones today. Now, when you've identified somebody within your organization that's not responding to coaching, there has to be some sort of separation of the relationship because of values. What do you do with the rest of the team that may have really liked this person, who may not have realized that this person was violative of the values of the organization?
Those are probably the toughest, right? Because as Rebecca was saying, it's hard, and you have to look at the bigger picture of the company and the team, and we have to live, breathe, hire, and fire by our values. But not everybody will fully understand, and it goes back to what we were talking about in the last episode and in this one, just constantly bringing up and talking about our values. What does that mean? How does it apply in actual real life situations? And really identifying or calling out individuals and colleagues and team members who exemplify what those values are. And when we're at the point where we have to separate for someone because they just don't align with the values, it's advising the team that, yes, this is a difficult situation. We wish the person the best, but we have to think bigger picture, and we're going to weather the storm together. I want you to come to me. I'll answer what I can, but I want you to know that you're a valued employee or a valued team member. You're a valued person of this company, and together we're going to move forward. And when we come out of this, we're not only going to be stronger, but we're going to be more productive, and we're going to learn from it. And it shows that the company does truly value what we put forward. Sometimes it's just words on a piece of paper or words on a computer or words up in an office, right? But to literally identify we take it seriously. And we just don't mean if you mess up one time and violate a value that you're out. No, it's what Rebecca was saying. There's going to be coaching, there's going to be conversations, there's going to be, of course, we have to document it all, but we want to try to get that person back on track. And there is a point in time where we have to put the needs of the clients and the needs of the company or the firm first. And when we're at that crossroads, that's when those values come into play and we make that tough decision. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a storm. People aren't going to understand because you separated from their friend or their work buddy, right? But hopefully, as a company, we were doing a good job of advising and explaining what values mean and why we really hold them near and dear to our heart and how it applies to the company or the firm. And there's so many positives that can be done with that too. And it's not just calling out people and who exemplify certain values. It's we're going to do something because we're your partner, because we're client focused, because we're employee centric, because we want to make this a destination career for you, which means we're going to do what we can because we value you and we want you to grow and we want you to be on that journey with us. But there's going to be times when employees will not rise to that level, and the needs of the company and the needs of the clients have to come first. And those are just difficult decisions, but the decisions that aren't made quickly and they're not just one day we wake up and decide, oh, well, this person no longer conforms to our values. It's a long, arduous process most of the time, but it's tough and it's hard.
It is. And, as weird as this sounds, one of the ways that we respect the values of our team members is to make sure that when somebody doesn't hold the same values isn't here. We don't water down the great values that our great team members have by allowing somebody else to come in without those values. And that is a hard decision. And sometimes it's a decision that's contrary to the bottom line, but we have to be values based and everybody has to see that our leadership is around those values. So Dan and Rebecca, I want to thank you for talking to me about a relatively hard topic, right? Leadership on both the positive and negative side of values, but it does make it easier when you have a backbone to your leadership. Your values are your backbone. And as long as you follow that backbone, you're going to be strong in your decisions moving forward. Your decisions will make sense to everybody. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. We look forward to talking to you next time, and thank you for joining us on this interesting conversation. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.